السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, continuing off where we left it, I believe we finished with ejaculation due to stimulation. And we mentioned that any type of stimulation that leads to ejaculation, this breaks your fast. The next matter is demonstration of postnatal bleeding. We mentioned the hadith that were related to that, the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. And we also mentioned that the hukum for postnatal takes the same hukum as the menstruation. So they both have the same hukum. The person that receives their menstruation or enters into postnatal bleeding after they have given birth, they're required to stop their fast and continue their fast after they have cleansed themselves of the menstruation or the postnatal bleeding. And also apostasy. Apostasy nullifies the action that the person is engaged in. Not just that action, but also all the other actions that precede the apostasy. So any khair, any good that he used to do, it all becomes nullified. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, وَلَقَدْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ وَإِلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ لَإِنْ أَشْرَكْتَ لَيَحْبِطَنَّ عَمَلُكَ. That it was revealed to those that to you and those that preceded you, that if you make shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your deeds will be perished. Your deeds will be perished. So if the person is fasting and all of a sudden he decides to leave Islam, that day's worth of fast is perished. It weighs no value. And if he re-enters Islam that same day, he has to repeat the fast of that day. Why? Because the time of making the intention ended. He has to wait for the next time where he can make the intention to fast that day again. So this becomes a day that he needs to make up. And changing of the intentions. The last one is changing of the intention. If the person is fasting and while he's fasting he changes his intention to break his fast, he breaks his fast. So for example, the person, he has plans to go on a journey. He wants to go a trip to Perth, for example. And this is considered as travel, correct? And then he makes the intention that I'm not going to be fasting today. I'll break my fast because I'll be traveling to Sydney, to Perth. So he broke his fast. His fast is no longer there. But he didn't eat, he didn't drink. He didn't do anything else. Later on at the airport, customs stopped him and they said, sorry, there's no travel for you today. Go back home. He didn't end up going on his journey. So now can he remake his intention to fast for the rest of that day? No, he cannot do that. Why? Because the intention was changed. It was already broken. So the time to make the intention has already passed him. He has to wait for the next time to remake the same intention again for that fast. So when the person's intention changes, then his amal also changes. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. So that intentions, deeds are based on intention. So if you intended to break your fast, then you have indeed broken your fast. Now disliked acts during the time of fast. So while you're fasting, there are acts that the person should avoid in engaging. Excessive rinsing of the mouth and nose. We mentioned the hadith before, where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, be excessive in doing your istinshaq and madmada, except while you are fasting. So this is disliked to do while you are fasting, for the fear of having water enter into your throat and down to your stomach. Engaging in matters that increases the desire. Engaging in matters that increases the desire. So watching things that you're not supposed to be watching. Visualizing and thinking about things that you're not supposed to be thinking about. Even if hugging and kissing your spouse is going to lead to the increase of your desires, then this is disliked for you to do during the month of Ramadan. It doesn't break your fast, but it is disliked for you in case it leads to you not being able to control your shahwa, your desires, and you end up committing the act of intimacy while you are fasting. While you are fasting. So this is sadd dari'a. This is known as putting a block or preventative in the way of the action. So abstain from things that increase your desires. Engaging in foul speech. Any speech that has no benefit, that has no merits, people swearing, people lying, people gossiping and so on. This is disliked for the person who is fasting. It doesn't break his fast, but it is disliked for him because it reduces the reward that he receives from the fast, the ajr that he receives from the fast. And overall, in general, indulging in sins, whatever type of sin this may be, indulging in sins, this is disliked for the person, especially for, and not just for the month of Ramadan, every other time. A Muslim should not engage in sins, but especially in the months of Ramadan, you should be extra careful in regards to what you do and avoid engaging in sins. Inshallah, we'll cover, before we finish with the ahkam of the Siyam, two special circumstances where the scholars have spoken about. And this is something that the people find themselves often. The elderly and his situation when he's fasting, and also the pregnant woman and the woman that is breastfeeding. What is upon them and what are the rulings that surround these two scenarios. In regards to the elderly, the person who reached of age where he's weak, he's unable to fast. He mentions that he heard Ibn Abbas, سمع Ibn Abbas يقول or يقرأ, reciting the verse وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين. And those that find it difficult to fulfill the obligation of fast, upon them is fidya طعام مسكين, to feed a miskin. To feed a miskin for every day that they have broken their fast. Some of the people at that time, they used to say that this was abrogated when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to fast the whole month. The option of feeding the poor was not there anymore. But Ibn Abbas, he mentions and he says that this was not abrogated. لَيْسَتْ بِمَنْسُوخَةٍ. It is not abrogated, it's still active. وهو الشيخ الكبير والمرأة الكبيرة لا يستطيعان أن يصوما. It is for the sheikh. Sheikh here refers to the elderly. Don't think that the term sheikh is only used for a practicing religious person or an imam or so. The term sheikh has different uses in the Arabic language, and amongst them, the elderly, senior, and the elderly woman that are incapable of fulfilling the duties of fast. This verse still applies to them. فَلْيُطْعِمَانِ مَكَانَ كُلِّ يَوْمٍ مِسْكِينٍ. Let them feed in the place of every day that they don't fast a poor person. Let them feed a poor person in the place of every day that they don't fast. So in other words, this is a fatwa from who? Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas, with his knowledge in the Quran and the Sunnah, has given this fatwa that it is permissible for them to break their fast because of their incapability of fulfilling it, and in its place they're allowed to give, they're allowed to feed the poor person. In regards to the pregnant woman and the breastfeeding woman, they have a special ruling. A scenario the scholars they speak about is one of the two scenarios. If she's scared for her health, so this individual that's breastfeeding, or this individual that is pregnant, this woman, if she's scared for her health, that if she fasts that it was going to cause her problems, then it is allowed for her to break her fast. And there is no ikhtilaf in that matter. There is no ikhtilaf in that matter, where the scholars have allowed for her to break her fast. This if she fears for herself. And she falls under the hukum of the marid, the person who is sick. She feels being incapable of fulfilling it and worried for her own safety. She falls under the person who's sick. Just as the person who's sick is concerned for his safety and his health and is worried he's not able to fulfill it, the same illah here, they say that she falls under the same category. Now for the ones that are not just fearful for themselves, but they are fearful for their children. So she's fearful for what's in her stomach, or she's fearful for what she's breastfeeding, the child that she's breastfeeding. Here the scholars have differed. The scholars have differed into three categories. The first category is that upon them is fidya. There is nothing else that is upon them. And this is the qawl of Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. And then the second qawl, the second position of the ulama is that upon them is fidya and to make up the day that they missed. And this is the qawl of the Jumhur. Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed and Imam Malik. This is their position. And then you have some of these scholars of the Salaf who say that upon her is only fidya. Upon her is only fidya. Upon her is to make the fast, qada. Upon her is to make the fast. Abu Hanifa, upon her is fidya. The Jumhur, upon her is fidya and qada. And some of the scholars who have chosen the position of upon her is qada only. She just needs to make up the days that she missed. And they hold her to be the same category as the one that is sick. So this is the aqwal of the ulama. The scholars have differed. There are sahabas, narrations of sahabas giving verdicts based on each one of these. Giving verdicts based on each one of these. So if the person finds themselves in that situation and they go seek the mufti or somebody's fatwa and he's given them the fatwa that upon her is just qada, this is fine for her to act upon. And if somebody else gives her the fatwa of that for her is to do fidya and just feed for every day that she misses, then this is also fine. These are legitimate positions that the scholars have. So with that, we have concluded the ahkam part, the second part of our talk. And this is the final part of our talk in regards to some of the advices that the scholars have given us when it comes to making the most of the month of Ramadan. How to make the most of the month of Ramadan. The first thing the scholars will tell us is have an understanding of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says when He says to you, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this month for. And they say that the purpose of you fasting is to gain taqwa, to have an increase in your taqwa. So what is taqwa? You have to understand what is taqwa for you to be able to make the most out of your fast. The scholars, they say taqwa is being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching and monitoring every single action that you do. And there isn't an action that you do except you know that I'll be punished for this or I'll be rewarded for this. This is what taqwa is. Being conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the highest level of al-ihsan. Ahsantum. The maratib of the deen, the levels of our religion is into three. You have the base where every single person that says La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah is expected to be, which is al-Islam. And al-Islam is 5 pillars. To make the testimony, to establish salah, to give zakah, to fast Ramadan and to perform the Hajj if you are capable of performing it, or if you are able of performing it. This is wajib upon every single Muslim. And then there is a level that is higher than that goes beyond that, and this is the level of Iman. The level of Iman. Unfortunately, people understood this level in a wrong way. And they say that once the person has reached the level of a mu'min, khalas, he doesn't need to pray no more. He's at a level that is higher than Islam. And you'll find many of the Sufis, they tell you that my Imam has reached a level where prayer is not wajib upon him anymore. He doesn't pray anymore. Subhanallah. Or he doesn't fast anymore. Or he doesn't need to give zakah anymore. He becomes above these 5 pillars of Islam. Why? Because they believe that he reached into the next level, the level of a mu'min. Khalas, you're a mu'min, you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These acts are acts to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not needed anymore. And this is misguidance. And people actually believe this. They actually support this imam or this scholar of theirs in this misguidance. They support him in the misguidance. No one will dare say to him, no. You're upon misguidance. This is batil, this is wajib upon every single Muslim. What gives you excuse? If the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is higher than the iman you'll ever be, we're still praying and giving fast and performing Hajj and all that. What makes you more special than the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They never think to themselves to ask. But ala kulli hal, yes, this is a higher level than the level of Islam. What is the difference between the level of Islam and the level of Iman? The scholars, they say that not every Muslim is a mu'min, but every mu'min is a Muslim. Not every Muslim is a mu'min. People that are fulfilling their 5 pillars of Islam, there are those that haven't reached the level of Iman, the ranks of a mu'min. So they can't be called mu'mins. But the one that reaches that rank, he reached that rank fulfilling the Arkan al-Islam. So he holds the title of being a mu'min and a Muslim together, by default. How can we differentiate between a Muslim and a mu'min? It's a very interesting thing. And a way to differentiate it, look at the arkan of al-Iman. Look at the arkan of al-Iman. What are the arkan of Iman? First one, أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وبالقدر خيره وشره. We'll just look at the وبالقدر خيره وشره. Just that pillar of the 6 pillars of Iman. We'll just pick that pillar out as an example. When the person who hasn't reached the level of Iman, when calamities befall him, why ya Allah? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Why am I being tested with this? Why me? If he was to reach the level of Iman and understood the meaning of Al-Qadr, he would understand خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ min Allah. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you will find the mu'min, when calamities befall him, what does he say? إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ قَدَّرَ اللَّهُ وَمَا شَاءَ فَعَلَ حَسْبِيَ اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. Are they the same now? They're not the same. One is questioning his Lord. The other one submitted himself to his Lord. They're not the same. So now you can see the difference in their level. One is still stuck in the level of Al-Islam, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the other one has transcended that and he entered the level of Iman. He understood the meaning of Iman and he embodied Iman. And a level higher than that is what we're trying to achieve during the month of Ramadan. Al-Ihsan, having an increase of taqwa. And we explained that taqwa is being conscious of who? Of your Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having that consciousness. And this is the definition of al-ihsan. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه. To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you are seeing Him. But we don't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. صح? So what happens in return? فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. If you don't see Him, know that He sees you. So when you have that mentality that my Lord is watching every single deed that I am doing, and you refrain and obstruct, protect yourself from falling into these sins, you have reached that level of al-ihsan. You've went past the level of al-mu'min. And with taqwa, there are benefits to it. Having taqwa, there is benefit to it. It's not just have the taqwa and khalas. There are benefits that come with taqwa. And indeed, these are seen in the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The chosen ones, the befriended ones of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the awliya. And yes, there is something called awliya Allah. It's not something that the Sufis made up. But they went extreme in the aspect of awliya. They went extreme in the aspect, in the understanding of awliya. The one that is closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is considered from the awliya of Allah. And this is something that is only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not me looking at Zaki and saying, Anta wali min Allah. You are a saint from the saints of Allah. I wouldn't know that. Why? Because this is ilm al-ghayb. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows of. Not something that the bashar would know. But there are signs that the person can see if he has reached that level of taqwa. And amongst these virtues that you receive with having taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. The one that is conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will find a way out for him. You'll find that no matter what he finds himself in, no matter what situation he finds himself in, he has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't lie, he doesn't cheat, he doesn't rob to make his situation. He relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in return, what does Allah do for him? يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. He provides for him a way out. This is a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for him. But when people find themselves in sticky situation, they will do any means to get out. Lie, cheat, rob, any way to get out, any means to get out. A mu'min, a muttaqi, he's not like that. He is conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the doors of rizq for him. وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And he will grant him rizq from means that he was not counting upon. He's going through a stressful moment, financial situation, he's struggling. And all of a sudden, somebody comes knocking on his door and somebody says to him, you have inherited from your uncle so-and-so this much. There was no one else left to inherit, and what was left here is now to you. It belongs to you. Was he counting on this money? Was he expecting this money? But because he was patient, he feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He didn't go to the bank and get a loan and be in interest and so on, or steal from the people and so on. He was patient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for him a way out. A way that he was not expecting. A rizq from a way that he was not expecting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, إِن تَتَّقُوا اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ فُرْقَانًا. If you are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make furqan for you. He will give you furqan. And we mentioned furqan is what? A criterion that assists you in being able to tell that this is haqq and this is batil. This is the truth and this is false. The conscious person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would know that what I'm doing is wrong, what I'm doing is right, what I'm engaging in is correct, it brings me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What I'm engaging in takes me far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because of the taqwa that he had with Allah. Allah granted him this criterion. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِ يُسْرًا. And whoever is conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes from his affairs ease. If you look at him, he's struggling. From the appearance, from the outward look, he is struggling. But in his heart, he's at peace. He's not stressed. He's not worried. He's happy and content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. Where others, you'll find them that they're in any chaos. He's not at ease, he can't sleep at night, tossing and turning, stressed, worried. And in his life, it's upside down. Why? Because he hasn't left his affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's trying to control matters that is not in his control. But the one that is conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for him. Easy for him by being content with the matter. He's not struggling with it. Inshallah, the nasr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. The aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. The assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. And there are many, many, many virtues that come along with having taqwa with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is no better time to build that taqwa than the month of Ramadan. When you are watching and counting and refraining from the halal matters that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made halal for you while you're fasting. Drinking and eating is not haram. Eating bread is not haram. Drinking water is not haram. But during this fast, this period, you're abstaining from it, refraining from it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does not increase you in taqwa, saying that I have given up my desires, my shahwa to drink and eat and fulfill my needs with my wife for this certain period because Allah refrained me from it. Allah told me not to do it. Of course it will increase your taqwa. So this is the best time for you to work on your taqwa. If you're used to swearing a lot, every time you say something, remember, I am fasting, refrain from it. If you're used to gossiping and chit-chatting about people and talking behind their backs, remind yourself, I am fasting, I shouldn't be involved in this matter. I shouldn't be doing these things. So don't walk away from Ramadan without having increased your taqwa. That's goal number one. Don't let Ramadan end without me having some increase of taqwa. Some form of iman increased in me. If you came into Ramadan and left Ramadan in the same state, you have lost. You have wasted 30 days, an opportunity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. So don't be from those. My next advice that I advise myself and you, was given to me by the scholars, is salah. Do not abandon salah during the time that you're fasting. When you are fasting, don't neglect your salah. Unfortunately, you'll find many people is happy to fast and starve and be hungry all day, but he doesn't pray. He doesn't pray at all. It doesn't faze him, it doesn't bother him. The Prophet ﷺ, he sent Mu'adh to Yemen as a governor to govern the people of Yemen. And he said to him, you will come across a group of people who are Ahlul Kitab. They are the people of the book. فَأَوَّلُ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ. The first thing that you call them to is La ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. This is what you should call them to. The first thing. Don't call them to salah. Don't call them to fast. Don't call them to zakah. Don't call them to anything. Call them to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. فَإِنْ أَطَاعُوكَ لِذَلِكَ. If they obey you in that, if they accept that from you, they submitted to La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, then teach them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala افترض عليهم 5 صلوات في كل ليلة ويوم. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it obligatory upon them 5 daily prayers in their nights and day. And a takeaway point here is فَإِنْ أَطَاعُوكَ لِذَلِكَ. If they obey you to that. If they don't obey you to La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, what's the point of teaching them salah? It's not accepted. It's not going to be accepted from them. Then he goes on to, if they accept salah from you, teach them about the zakah. Teach them about the zakah. So if they rejected salah and they didn't pray and they said, we believe in Allah, but we're not going to pray, there is no point in you teaching them about zakah. Don't even bother going to zakah next. Stick to salah. Until they affirm salah and they pray salah, don't move on to zakah. When they only accept salah, finally they move on to zakah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it wajib upon their wealth, that it should be taken from their riches and be given to the poor. So this is the statements of the Prophet ﷺ in regards to the importance of matters. If that was the case for salah and zakah, the same applies with Ramadan. How can you offer Ramadan and fast but you don't pray? You have a bigger problem than missing your fast. The problem of salah. That Yawm al-Qiyamah, the first thing you'll be asked about is your salah. Forget about the psalm. Where is your salah? There is no salah there. Then there is no need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to look at the rest of your deeds. But oh Allah, I've fasted 60 years of my life. I have so many Ramadans, oh Allah, under my belt. It's not going to help you. Why? Because you did not fulfill the second pillar of Islam, the salah. So it's very important that during the month of Ramadan, you take importance to your salah and also for the rest of your life. It's not just a Ramadan thing, and once Ramadan finishes, khalas, I can go back to taking and missing my salahs. But just know, because you're not fasting, your salah is, your fast is invalid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he makes mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of the person leaving off his food and his drinks if he's involved in what? Qawl al-zur. If the person is involved in evil speech, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of him leaving off his food and his drink. This is for qawl al-zur, evil speech. Imagine the one that leaves off salah. What need does Allah have with your fast? Absolutely zero. So it's very important that you pay attention to your salah. My next advice that I would give, that was given to me, is spend time with the Quran. This is the month of the Quran. And we made mention that in regards to the story of the family that lost their wealth, and when the Shaykh placed it back in the Mus'haf, they went a whole year waiting for the Shaykh to come back, ask him about his wealth, about the wealth that they lost, and he informed them that it was in between the Mus'haf. If you were to open the Mus'haf, you would have seen the wealth. And that's a whole year that they went without reciting the Quran. And unfortunately, that's the situation of some people. So make a task, a goal for yourself that this month I'm going to read this much of the Quran. I'm going to complete this much of the Quran. And to increase your himmah, your aspiration, I'll give you guys some examples from Salaf. And just look at how they were with the Quran in this month. Starting with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It has been mentioned by Abu Hurairah that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to revise the Quran every year with Jibreel. And in the month of Ramadan, he would revise it twice. Jibreel alayhi salam, who received from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and who passed it on to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The two people that know the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most, the best, are going back and forth revising the Quran with one another. This was the hal of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the month of Ramadan. He would revise the Quran with Jibreel. So we should also revise the Quran in the month of Ramadan, even if it's just once, even if it's just half of the Quran, even if it's just a third, even if it's just a quarter, even if it's just amma. Have some time with the Quran. It's not about how much you've recited, it's how much you have actually put an effort into reading and understanding what you're reading. It's about tadabbur, understanding, not just recite. There is no fa'idah in that. You should be able to understand in what you're reciting and what you're learning from the Quran. It's been narrated from Ibrahim al-Naqi that Al-Aswad, one of the Salaf, used to complete the Quran in Ramadan every 2 nights. 114 chapters completed every 2 nights. So one night 15 juz, the other night the other 15 juz. Completed the Quran in 2 nights. This is Al-Aswad, one of the Salafs. Also Qatada used to complete the Quran in 7 days. Used to complete the Quran in 7 days. This is not the month of Ramadan. This is every single other month outside of Ramadan. So he used to complete the Quran how many times in the month? 4 times. Every week he's completing the Quran. And this is outside the month of Ramadan. Guess what he does during the month of Ramadan? And when Ramadan came, he would complete it every 3 days. So he would drop it down from 7 to 3 days. So every 3 days, he's finishing the Quran. It's not just there. And when the last 10 days entered, he would finish the Quran every night. From back to the front. Front to back, front to back, front to back. Every night. So he went down from 7 to 3 to every single night. Allahu Akbar. He saw the importance of the month of Ramadan and the importance of these last 10 days. He increased in reciting the Quran. It was also narrated from Mujahid that he used to complete the Quran every night in Ramadan. From the start to the end, how many completions? 29 to 30 completions during the month of Ramadan. Allahu Akbar. Something even more amazing. Al-Rabi' ibn Sulaiman, he mentions that Al-Shafi'i used to complete the Quran 60 times in Ramadan. Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i. 60 times in the Quran. That's twice. What? Twice a day. And this is from the barakah that they had from their time. And this is the sidq that they had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the aspiration that they had when it comes to worship. When you have that aspiration, you will find yourself that you're capable of doing what these Salaf, righteous individuals did. It comes from within. You have to be sadiq with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That this is what I want to achieve from my fast in Ramadan, in this month of Ramadan.
Just like a quick announcement. Just for those brothers that are under the pergola, if you can give your cards, please. There's only like 2 or 3 cars under the pergola. There's a silver Ford, another silver car.
Hybrid.
Toyota Corolla hybrid, please. Whoever owns these cars, if you could move them inside the car park and we'll set up for the food and drinks. Sorry.
The next advice is, as we mentioned, to be extra with performing good deeds. And especially when it comes to charity. As it's been mentioned by Ibn Abbas, that the Prophet ﷺ used to be ajwad. He used to be generous. وَأَجْوَدُ مَا يَكُونُ في Ramadan. And the most generous he would be during the month of Ramadan. So be generous, give. These actions that you do in the month of Ramadan is multiplied many-fold. 10 يعني أمثال 10 folds. 10 folds. So make sure that you thrive for that. My next advice is making lots of dua, especially while you're fasting, and using all the opportunities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you by combining the different du'as, such as Sa'at al-Istijaba in Fridays, such as when you are about to have suhoor, make your du'as, because it's the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends to the lowest heaven. When it rains and you're fasting, make dua. When you're in sujood and praying, make dua. Take advantage of the weapon of the believer. Dua, salahul Muslim. Dua is the weapon of the believer. Take advantage of that weapon. Use it as often as you can. And to be accountable. Be accountable with your deeds. Make sure that whatever you do in this month, that's you held yourself accountable for it. I did this sin, I need to make tawbah from it. I did this khair, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from me. To be accountable in all your deeds and not just let the month go like any other month, where you don't know what you have achieved, what you have accomplished, what you have lost, what you have gained. It just flew by. Hold yourself accountable to it. And I'll finish with this advice, my dear brothers and sisters. Don't be worshippers of Ramadan, be the worshippers of the one who gave you Ramadan. Unfortunately, some people, they only pull up and fix themselves during the month of Ramadan. And as soon as Ramadan finishes, it's as if nothing has ever happened. They go back to their old ways. Nothing has changed. They are conscious and fearful that my sawm might not be accepted. My sawm might be invalid. And he's focusing on fulfilling his salawat. He's focusing on controlling his tongue and all that. As soon as the month of Ramadan finishes, he swears, he drinks, he does this and that, goes back to zina. Some crazy things that you would hear. People take it as a joke. The month of Ramadan is coming, I need to break up with you. It's haram for me to be in a haram relationship while I'm fasting. When did it become halal? It was always haram in Ramadan and outside of Ramadan. And when the month of Ramadan finishes, I've missed you so much. A'udhu billah. He's playing with Allah, he's playing with himself. He's playing with himself. He's not deluding no one, he's deluding himself. So don't be from those that focus on Ramadan because it is the month where everything is multiplied and everything is rewarded. But after Ramadan, khalas, you go back to your old ways. It's a very dangerous path. Eventually, you're going to lose Ramadan itself as well. You don't hold Ramadan to the same status and value you used to hold Ramadan. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stripped that away from you. So I'll finish with that. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this from us, and to grant us all the ability to enter Ramadan in health and good iman, and to make the most of this Ramadan and be from those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants His safety from the punishment of the hellfire. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those that reach Laylatul Qadr and make the most out of this night. Ramadan in itself has many virtues. Unfortunately, this is not something that I have prepared for our talk, but if you read in the books of the hadith, you will find the virtues of Ramadan. And hopefully maybe in a reminder or two coming up before Ramadan starts, some of the brothers in their lesson can cover the virtues of Ramadan, so that you are spiritually prepared and ready for this blessed month. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.
جزاك الله خير.